I got home from my mother's funeral, sat on the edge of the bed I grew up in, and opened the banking app to pay the florist. The screen loaded and my vision blurred, not from crying, from math. $112 gone, transferred out in 6 chunks over 3 days, while I was picking hymns and choosing caskets. My brother leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, and when I looked up at him, with my phone shaking in my hand, he didn't even blink. He said, "Mom would have wanted us to split everything fair." I stood up slowly, closed the app, and said, "Then you won't mind when the detective asks you to explain fair." He laughed. He actually laughed. And that was the last time my brother ever laughed in front of me. My name is Ethan, and this is the story of how my own family used my mother's death to rob me blind. It's a story about grief turned into a weapon, about silence mistaken for weakness, and about the moment I stopped mourning and started fighting. I want to share something personal with you today. But first, can you do me a favor? Say hi in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from. I always read them, and honestly, knowing someone out there hears me makes this easier. Thank you. Now, let me take you back to where it started. And if this story hits close to home, consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps me keep telling stories like this. Stories that remind us we're not alone, even when the people closest to us make us feel like we are. My mother was diagnosed on a Tuesday in March. The kind of raw Nashville morning where the sky can't decide between rain and just staying gray. I was sitting in my apartment in Austin, a 1-bedroom above a print shop on South Congress, editing a portfolio for a client who sold handmade guitars, when the call came. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The doctor gave her 8 to 12 months. She lasted 5. I need to tell you something about my family before any of this makes sense. There were 3 of us. My brother, 2 years older, always the one with the big plans and the empty wallet. My father, who left when I was 9, and sent birthday cards without money in them until I was 14, then stopped sending anything at all. And my mother, who held everything together with double shifts at the hospital and a stubbornness that made Tennessee oak look soft. She was a respiratory therapist. She worked nights. She came home smelling like antiseptic and instant coffee, and she never once told us she was tired, even when her shoes left marks on the kitchen tile from standing 12 hours straight. When I was 16, I started mowing lawns after school, not because she asked, because I heard her on the phone with the electric company, negotiating a payment plan in a voice so calm it scared me. I kept every dollar in a mason jar under my bed. My brother found it within a month. He said he borrowed $40 for gas. He never paid it back. My mother found out, and instead of making him return it, she handed me $60 from her own wallet and whispered, "Hide it better next time." I did. I opened my first bank account the following week. I was the only junior at my high school who knew what a routing number was. By the time I left for college in Austin on a partial scholarship and a full load of anxiety, I had saved $3,200. I told no one. Not my brother, not my roommate, not the girl I dated sophomore year, who thought I was broke because I never ate out. I was broke. But I was also building something. I freelanced through school, designing logos and album covers and menus for taco trucks. After graduation, I landed a job at a branding agency downtown. The salary wasn't much, but I stacked it like bricks. Every freelance check, every tax refund, every dollar I didn't spend on new shoes or bar tabs went into one account. Over 8 years, that account grew to $112,000. It was not retirement. It was not a fortune. It was a down payment on a studio space I had been watching for 2 years, a converted warehouse on the east side with concrete floors and windows that caught the afternoon light like a greenhouse. It was the place where I was finally going to stop working for other people's visions and start building my own. When my mother got sick, I drove to Nashville every other weekend. 10 hours round trip. I slept on the couch in her living room and cooked meals she barely touched. My brother lived 20 minutes away and showed up once a week, usually when he needed something signed or something fixed. He had a way of turning every visit into a transaction. He would sit at the kitchen table and talk about deals that were about to close, investments that were about to pay off, people who owed him. His voice was always half a decibel louder than the room needed. My mother would listen with her eyes closed, and I could never tell if she was resting or hiding. During one of my last visits before she passed, she pulled me close. Her hand was so thin I could feel the bones shift when she squeezed. She said, "Don't let your brother near your money, Ethan. Promise me. I promised. I thought she was being protective the way she always was, worrying about the small stuff while the big stuff ate her alive. I didn't know she was handing me a warning wrapped in a goodbye. She died on a Saturday morning in August. The air outside was thick enough to swim through. I was holding her hand when the monitors flattened. My brother was in the hallway on the phone. I don't know who he was talking to. I never asked. In the hours that followed, something shifted between us. Not the grief, the logistics. He moved fast. He called the funeral home before I had finished signing the hospital paperwork. He suggested we use the family attorney for the estate, a man named Dale Burris who had known our mother for decades. He offered to handle the arrangements so I could just grieve. I let him because I was drowning, and he seemed like he was swimming. The funeral was on a Wednesday. The church was small, white clapboard, the kind of building that looks like it's been praying longer than anyone inside it. I gave the eulogy. My brother sat in the front row and checked his phone twice. Afterward, people filled my mother's house with casseroles and whispers. My aunt came from Memphis. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years squeezed my arm and said she was a fighter. She's at peace. She's in a better place. None of it landed. I walked through the house touching her things. The mug with the chipped handle she refused to throw away. The stack of crossword puzzles on the nightstand. The reading glasses with one arm held on by tape. Every object was a sentence in a language I was about to lose forever. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the guest bed and opened my phone to pay the florist. I typed in my password. The app loaded, and the number on the screen sent a jolt through my chest like touching a live wire. I refreshed. I closed the app and opened it again. I checked the transaction history and watched the lines scroll up, each one a transfer I had not made. 6 transfers, spread over 3 days. The first one hit the morning after she died, while I was still at the hospital filling out forms. The last one cleared the afternoon of the funeral, while I was standing at a podium telling strangers how my mother taught me to be brave. My mouth went dry. My ears rang. I felt the blood leave my face and pool somewhere around my knees. I sat there with the phone in my hand for what felt like an hour, but was probably 4 minutes. Then I heard the creak of the hallway floor and looked up to see my brother standing in the doorway with a bottle of beer, his tie loosened, his collar open, looking like a man who had just finished a long day at the office, instead of a man who had just buried his mother. I turned the screen toward him. I didn't say a word. He looked at it, then at me, and his expression never changed. Mom would have wanted us to split everything fair, he said. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not surprise, recognition. I had seen this face before, the same face he wore when he found my mason jar, when he borrowed money he never returned, when he told our mother he needed a cosign on a lease he couldn't afford. It was the face of someone who had already decided the money was his and was now waiting for me to agree. I asked him how he accessed my account. He shrugged. He said Mom had given him the passwords. He said she told him to make sure everything was divided equally after she was gone. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. I asked him why the transfers started the morning after she died, before the will was even read. He took a sip of beer and said, I was just being proactive. The word proactive hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. I closed my eyes and forced my lungs to work. In my head, I heard my therapist's voice, the one I had been seeing since the diagnosis, steady as a metronome. When the ground shakes, plant your feet wider. I planted my feet. I told my brother I was going to bed. I locked the guest room door and sat in the dark with my phone glowing against the ceiling. I opened the Notes app and started writing. Every transaction, every timestamp, the balance before, the balance after, the exact words he had said to me, including the shrug. I screenshotted every page of the banking history and sent them to my own email. Then I sent them to the cloud. Then I copied them onto a thumb drive I kept in my laptop bag. 3 copies. Because I had learned a long time ago that when someone takes something from you, they'll also try to take the proof. I did not sleep. I lay on the guest bed with my shoes still on and listened to the house settle. The refrigerator hummed. The porch light cast a yellow strip across the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance a train moved through, its horn low and long, the sound of something leaving and not coming back. The next morning, I called my friend Priya. She was a forensic accountant who worked for a firm in Dallas, and she had the kind of brain that could trace money the way a bloodhound traces scent. I told her everything. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh my God." She said, "Pull the full access log from your bank, screenshot the device IDs, and do not confront him again until we have a paper trail he can't rewrite. Then she said, and Ethan, change your passwords right now. I changed them sitting in my mother's kitchen while my brother slept upstairs in the room that used to be mine. I drove back to Austin that afternoon. The highway unwound in front of me like a ribbon being pulled off a spool. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and every 20 miles I had to remind myself to unclench my jaw. When I got home, the apartment above the print shop felt smaller than I remembered, the walls closer, the ceiling lower, as if grief had compressed the space. I dropped my bag on the floor and stood in the middle of the room and let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. My mother was dead. My brother had stolen my future, and the studio with the concrete floors and the greenhouse windows was slipping away like water through a crack in the foundation. I called a lawyer the next morning. His name was Marcus, a friend of a friend, the kind of attorney who wore sneakers to court and won anyway. He asked me 3 questions. Did I authorize the transfers? No. Did my brother have legal access to the account? No. Did I have documentation? I have everything. He said, good. Because what your brother did has a name, and that name is wire fraud. The days that followed felt like walking through wet concrete. I filed a report with the bank. I filed a complaint with the Nashville police. I contacted the estate attorney, Dale Burris, and asked for a copy of my mother's will. When it arrived, my hands trembled opening the envelope. My mother had left the house to both of us equally. Her savings, $14,000, split down the middle. Her car to me. Her jewelry to a cousin in Memphis. Nowhere in the document did it say anything about my personal bank account. Nowhere did it authorize my brother to touch a single cent. He had lied. He had used our mother's death as a smokescreen and the chaos of grief as a window. I sat at my desk and read the will 3 times. The 3rd time, I felt something harden behind my ribs. Not rage exactly, but a decision made at a level deeper than thought. I was going to get every dollar back, and he was going to answer for taking them. My brother called that evening. His voice was casual, rehearsed. He said we should sit down and work things out like family. He said lawyers would only make things ugly. He said, and I remember the exact words because I wrote them down, "You're going to throw away your only brother over some money? Mom would be ashamed of you." The sentence landed like a slap. I felt the sting bloom across my face even though he was 500 miles away. For a half second the old impulse kicked in, the one that says keep the peace, absorb the hit, make it easy. Then I heard my mother's voice, thin and fierce, her hand bones pressing against mine. "Don't let your brother near your money." I hung up without responding. I set the phone face down on the table and pressed my palms flat until the shaking stopped. Priya came to Austin the following weekend. She sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, surrounded by printouts and spreadsheets, tracing the path of each transfer with a yellow highlighter. She found something I had missed. The transfers didn't go directly into my brother's personal account. They went through a shell company, registered in his girlfriend's name, a company with no employees, no website, and no revenue. A company that existed only to receive my money and make it harder to follow. He planned this, Priya said, looking up from the paper. This wasn't impulsive. He set up the entity 3 weeks before your mother died. The sentence knocked the air out of me. 3 weeks. While I was driving back and forth from Austin, cooking meals she couldn't eat, reading her crossword clues out loud because her eyes were too tired, my brother was building a pipeline to drain my account. He had been waiting for her to die, not to grieve, to collect. Marcus filed the formal complaint. The bank's fraud division opened an investigation. The police in Nashville assigned a detective, a woman named Torres who spoke in short sentences and took notes in a handwriting so small it looked like code. She asked me to walk her through the timeline, and I did, slowly, watching her pen move across the page. When I finished, she closed her notebook and said, "We'll need his devices." I nodded. I felt the strange vertigo of justice beginning to move, slow and heavy as a freight train, in my direction. My brother's response came not through a lawyer, but through the family. My aunt called from Memphis, her voice stiff with disapproval. She said I was tearing the family apart. She said grief makes people do desperate things, and I should have the grace to forgive. She said, "Your mother would never want this." I told her my mother warned me this would happen. The line went quiet. She hung up. Then the messages started. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years texted me paragraphs about loyalty and blood. A family friend posted on social media about children who abandoned their own. My brother's girlfriend, the one whose name was on the shell company, wrote a public status about how some people are so blinded by greed, they'll destroy a family over an inheritance dispute. She used the word inheritance like it was fact. It wasn't. This was theft, dressed in a black suit, pretending to be mourning. I sat in my apartment that night with the curtains drawn and the lights off, the glow of my laptop the only thing breaking the dark. I read every message, every post, every passive-aggressive comment. Each one was a small blade, not deep enough to kill, but enough to bleed. I called my therapist. She answered after hours, which she almost never did. I told her I felt like I was losing two families at once. The one my mother held together, and the one I thought would survive her. She said, "You're not losing family, Ethan. You're discovering who they actually are. That's different. It hurts the same, but it's different." The court date arrived on a morning, so clear the Nashville skyline looked like it had been cut from glass. I sat in the courtroom with Marcus beside me, my folder of evidence on the table, my hands clasped so tight my nails left crescents in my palms. My brother walked in wearing a suit I had never seen, his hair combed, his jaw set. His lawyer, a tall man with a voice like polished wood, argued that the transfers were a family matter, that my mother had verbally authorized the redistribution of assets, that I was exploiting a private grief for personal gain. The words filled the room like perfume trying to cover a smell. Marcus stood and placed the documents on the judge's bench one by one, the banking logs showing device IDs that matched my brother's phone, the shell company registration dated 3 weeks before our mother's death, the text messages where my brother had discussed the plan with his girlfriend in language that left no room for interpretation. Then he played the voicemail my brother had left me 2 days before the hearing, the one where he said, "Just drop it, Ethan. You can't prove anything, and even if you can, no jury is going to side with a son who sues his own brother after their mother dies." The room exhaled. The judge's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough, a tightening around the eyes. A single note jotted on a pad. When my turn came, I stood and let the silence hold me for a beat. I said, "My mother spent 30 years working nights so her sons would have something she never did. Stability, safety, a chance. She didn't leave me that money. I earned it. Every dollar. Over 8 years of saying no to things I wanted so I could build something I needed. My brother didn't take an inheritance. He took the future I built with my own hands, and he did it while I was standing at her grave." My brother stared at the table. His lawyer shuffled papers. The girlfriend in the gallery chewed the inside of her cheek. Somewhere behind me, I heard my aunt shift in her seat. The judge reviewed the documents, asked 2 clarifying questions, then ruled. Temporary restraining order on the shell company account. Full asset freeze pending investigation. Restitution hearing scheduled in 60 days. My brother's face went white, not with shock, with the realization that the story he had built, the careful fiction of the grieving brother just trying to be fair, had crumbled in a room where fictions go to die. Outside the courthouse, the October air was sharp enough to taste. Marcus shook my hand and said, "The hard part starts now." I nodded. I knew what he meant. The legal fight was moving, but the family fight was just beginning, and in the weeks that followed, the silence was louder than any accusation. Cousins stopped texting. My aunt blocked my number. The family friend deleted her post but never apologized. My brother's lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, which was denied. Then he filed a motion to reduce, which was partially granted. The shell company was dissolved. A portion of the funds were returned immediately, the rest ordered in installments under court supervision. My brother was charged with wire fraud and unauthorized access to financial accounts. He pleaded no contest. The sentence was 2 years probation, mandatory financial counseling, and full restitution of $112,000 plus legal fees. The judge looked at him when she read the terms and said, "Grief is not a license." He nodded once and didn't look at me. I wish I could tell you it felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like surgery, necessary, precise, and painful in a way that doesn't show on the surface. I drove back to Austin with the windows down and the radio off, and somewhere outside of Texarkana, I pulled over and cried. Not for the money, for the brother I thought I had, for the mother who saw it coming and tried to warn me, for the version of my life where family meant something that didn't have a price tag. 6 months later, I signed the lease on the studio. The concrete floors were cold under my boots. The windows caught the afternoon light exactly the way I had imagined. I set up my desk, hung the first piece I ever designed in college, a concert poster for a band that broke up before they played their first show, and stood in the center of the empty room. It smelled like dust and paint and possibility. On the shelf beside my monitor, I placed a small object, a mason jar, not the one my brother emptied when I was 16. A new one. Glass, clean, with a single penny inside. I had found it on the courthouse steps the day of the ruling, heads up, and kept it because I needed something small to hold on to. Priya visited the studio first. She brought Thai food and a bottle of something sparkling and stood in the doorway with her shoes off, looking at the space like it was a cathedral. Marcus sent a card that said nothing but earned in block letters. My neighbor from the print shop downstairs brought a succulent in a terracotta pot and said, "Welcome to the building officially." These were the people who had carried me, not by blood, by choice. Sunday afternoons became a thing. Priya and Marcus and a few friends I had made over the years would gather at the studio, bring food, play music too loud, argue about nothing important. One evening, as plates were being cleared and someone was trying to fix the Bluetooth speaker, my phone lit up, a text from my brother. It said, "I know you won't believe me, but I'm sorry. I was drowning and I grabbed the closest thing. That thing was you. I'll pay back every cent." I stared at the screen for a long time, then I locked it and set it down. I had learned something in the past year that I wished I had learned sooner. Forgiveness is not a door you open for someone else. It's a window you open for yourself. And the lock stays on the inside. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the studio with the lights low and the city humming outside. The mason jar caught the glow of a street lamp through the window, the penny inside throwing a tiny flash of copper. I thought about my mother's hand, thin and warm, squeezing mine in the hospital. I thought about her voice, the last real thing she ever gave me. "Don't let your brother near your money." She hadn't been talking about dollars. She had been talking about my life. She had been telling me to protect the thing I was building. The future she wouldn't be alive to see, but believed in anyway. I touched the jar and said out loud, "To no one," and to her, I kept my promise. For those of you still listening, I want to say this. If someone in your family has taken from you, whether it's money or peace or the simple right to trust, you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to choose who deserves a seat at your table and who has lost that right. Blood gives you relatives, but loyalty, respect, and honesty give you family. And sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you were born into. If you're carrying something heavy right now, something you haven't told anyone, something that wakes you up at 3 a.m. and sits on your chest like a stone, know this: you are not alone. You are not wrong for wanting better, and you are not weak for needing help. Drop a comment, tell me where you're listening from, tell me you're here. Because every time I see those words come in from places I've never been, from people I'll probably never meet, it reminds me that connection doesn't need a bloodline, it just needs honesty. If you believe stories like mine should be heard, subscribe, stay, share. Every voice here makes this circle wider, and the wider the circle, the harder it is for anyone to stand alone in the dark. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. This is not just the end of my story. It's the beginning of something we're building together.